Welcome our viewers on the eve of Makar Sankranti of 2023. Today we are going to share our views with you on the topic Global Economic Crisis in the midst of global recession and global inflation. Here, World Economic Forum in its theme of 2023 on cooperation in a fragmented world is expected that Global Economic Forum is or will present the full analytical view on global economic crisis, which presents or which hovers or which veers around global recession and global inflation. Anyway, we will see it whenever it comes before us, and we will analyze it, because World Economic Forum is generally a conglomeration of global corporates, global rich nations, global big industrialists, global big corporates. So, we will analyze it later after seeing the World Economic Forum debate from Davos. Here, the global interest rate hike has certainly disrupted the global economy, where advanced nations are moving towards recession, while emerging nations and other nations are moving towards rising inflation. Here, with the rising global inflation and global recession, we see that with global supply constraint, with lower business investment, with lower global economic growth, in the midst of food, fuel, fertilizer and energy crunch. So we see that rising or hiking global interest rate has brought borrowing costs higher, and rising borrowing costs has made price rise and rising inflation in some countries. And at the same time, the rising borrowing costs have made consumers' demand slower, economic growth slower, business investment slower, so slower purchasing power, rising joblessness, and falling purchasing power. These are the things, and it brought global recession for advanced nations. Here, seeing this situation, the world or economist Nobel laureate Professor Joseph Stiglitz has said that tighter credit policy will hurt more the global economy and will do little to lower inflation rate in the midst of rising cost of living and lower business investment. In this situation, it becomes our duty to find out or to pay attention towards the rising global interest rate, rising global joblessness, globally, falling GDP growth rate, falling global trade, falling global currency or depreciation of global currency, etc. Seeing this situation, or in the midst of this, we see that US dollar has appreciated by 7%, while Fed Reserve has printed dollar more than 30% against dollar in circulation, and Fed Reserve has also increased its interest rate above to 450 basis points in the midst of rising inflation, in the midst of lower business investment and lower economic growth. Here we see that global interest rate hike has become a worstful situation and has brought a worstful situation for global economy, where Fed Reserve has increased its interest rate in this year by 400 basis points, while Bank of England has increased its interest rate around 350 basis points, and recently European Central Bank has also increased interest rate around 35 basis points. Seeing these things, the other nations have also followed the footprints of Fed Reserve interest rate hike. Here in India, the Reserve Bank of India has increased its interest rate by 225 basis points. And out of rising interest rate globally, we see that business investment has become lower, borrowing cost has become higher, global economic growth has declined in the midst of supply constraint. This is the situation. Further, we see that global debt has also increased massively with the rising or with the appreciating US dollar and Fed interest rate hike in the midst of rising bond yields, not only US, not only India, but not only in other European countries, but other nations also. And the global debt has increased with the start of 2022 and has remained around 300 trillion US dollars. While emerging markets debt has remained around 90 trillion US dollar, which makes around 65% of emerging markets' total GDP. Here, in this situation, we see that in Indian context, the external debt has increased above to 610 billion US dollar in 2022, which is above to more than 55% in dollar denominated debt. Out of 610 billion US dollar external debt of India, which makes around more than 20 of India's GDP. This is the situation of external debt of India. While internal debt of India has increased and has remained above to 90% of India's GDP. So, with appreciating US dollar by 7% and Fed interest rate hike, with US bond yields hike, or above around 3.7%, the Indian bond yields have also increased by 7.3% in the year 2022, which is going to increase in coming year because of more and more debt position. Here in Indian context, the external debt is higher, where US denominated debt is above to 55% of total debt. So India is going to face the worst situation out of external debt because of rising or appreciating US dollar and Fed interest rate hike. This is the situation of global debt. So far as there is rising joblessness globally, where we see that in US, the jobless has remained around 5%. In England and European nations, it has remained around or above to 8%, while in Indian context, the joblessness has increased above to 8%. So the rising joblessness is creating problem where purchasing power has become lower, consumers' demand has become lower, business investment has become lower, economic growth and activities have become lower, and this is worsening the India's, not only India's, but other nations' economic situation. Their mass are facing the vulnerable situation in their respective countries. So far as GDP growth is concerned, the GDP growth has also declined massively in different countries of the world. The GDP growth rate, according to World Bank report, it will shrink and will remain around 1.7% against its expectation of 3% in coming year or in this year 2023. While India's GDP growth rate is concerned, it will remain around 6.6% according to World Bank report. While Reserve Bank of India has curtailed India's GDP growth rate around 6.6% in the year 2023, while global rating agencies Nomura and Moody's have expected that India's GDP growth rate will remain around 4.5% and 4% respectively in the year 2023. While UK's GDP growth rate will shrink around 0.5% and UK's and European nations' GDP growth rate will shrink around 0.9% in the year 2023. In this declining GDP growth rate has brought mass poverty, malnutrition, and joblessness, lower purchasing power, lower consumers' demand, and has forced massive or mass of the world for vulnerable economic situation. When we pay attention towards the global trade, we see that global trade has also declined massively. World Bank has forecasted that global trade will shrink and will remain around 1% in 2023 against its expectations of 3%. In this situation, we see that in India, the global trade has become deficit, where imports have increased massively, where imports have increased 50% more than its export in Indian context. And out of it, India's current account deficit has increased by 4.4% in the year 2022, which is going to above to 5% in 2023 because of appreciating US dollar, Fed interest rate hike, and foreign exchange rate hike. This is the situation. Here we see that in this situation, the trade is worsening the India's situation in the midst of rising borrowing cost, rising global interest rate, and US dollar appreciation above to 7%. And it affects it increases the foreign exchange rate hike. This is the situation. So far as joblessness is concerned, it has also increased massively in global world, in a global economic situation, where joblessness in UK has increased by 8%, in US by 4%, but in Indian economy it has remained above to 8%. This is the situation. In this situation, we see that globally, with the rise of interest rate hike by Fed Reserve and dollar appreciation, have also brought the global currency's appreciation. Global currency has appreciated against dollar because of hike in dollar index in the basket of greenbacks. So, in Indian context, the rupee has depreciated by 10% against the appreciating US dollar by 7% and in the year 2022, which is going to become more, where Indian rupee is going to become the depreciated one above than 12 or 15% in the year 2022 if Fed interest rate hike will continue, if dollar appreciation is continued in the midst of rising borrowing cost, in the midst of rising foreign exchange cost. This is the situation. In this situation, we see that in the midst of global economic crisis, the dual nature of credibility of central banks' role has been exposed, where global central banks have virtually become failure to tackle this global economic scenario which veers around or which have brought global recession and global inflation, where advanced countries are moving towards global recession and emerging markets and other emerging nations are moving towards rising inflation. And out of it, there is global joblessness, declining GDP growth rate, declining business investment, declining consumers' demand. So, some countries are facing recession while other countries are facing inflation in this global economic crisis scenario. So, we expect that World Economic Forum, which is going to in Davos, where the theme of World Economic Forum of 2023 is cooperation in a fragmented world, will bring better and better global economic solution for all of the global community. And global community is watching keenly towards World Economic Forum, where World Economic Forum has become the forum of global rich nations, global big corporates, global big industrialists. So they are playing, or World Economic Forum is playing that it is a conglomeration of rich people are thinking in the interest of rich people and rich nations, big corporates, big industrialists. So we urge World Economic Forum that without any discrimination or without any discriminating attitude towards emerging markets and other nations, rest of the world should pay attention. Their miserable situation should also be taken seriously, because most of the world are facing inflationary situation in the midst of rising interest rate, rising bond yields, rising US dollar appreciation, rising Fed interest rate, and declining economic growth, rising poverty, lower purchasing power. So